A man named Blake Snyder wrote a book called Save the Cat. It contains what's now known as a Snyder beat sheet. Snyder was looking for patterns in popular story and essentially taking your basic 3-act structure and breaking it down to a more organized and detailed approach to a overall arc known as story beats. It is held in high regard by many. The beat sheet reaches all the way up to the highest of levels. When looking at the screen adaptation for HBO's Game of Thrones from source material A Song of Ice and Fire, the presence of the Snyder beat sheet is undeniable. And believe it or not, the screen adaptation from A Song of Ice and Fire to HBO's Game of Thrones was and is still held in very high regard and is a go-to for an example of the adaptation of very unconventional narrative to the screen, which needs and requires structure. I often utilize the beat sheet not only in my own writing, but also when I'm analyzing content. I like to look at the adaptation process and I like to look at the actual structure of the story. I find if you're going to story craft, you have to actually know how stories are crafted. This is a quick look at how you can actually utilize the beat sheet. When you're looking at an episode like Season 8, Episode 1, Winterfell, you have a lot of mirroring of the pilot. That's something you're supposed to do. It's a common practice because it's effective. The visual connections are there. Those are obvious. But there's also little details that you're not going to pick out if you're just looking for visual connections. You're going to want to look for things like lines of dialogue that state theme. And this is our second beat. There's 15 beats, but since this isn't a screenwriting channel, I'm not going to go into all 15 beats. Let me know in the information below if you guys would like to have any videos exploring narrative theory. But for now, we'll keep it simple. This is a little detail I found in the first episode of Season 8 that I thought was a nice touch, and it was something that is subtle and utilized. Two of the beats in the first one we're just using because it's just in the video to begin with. It's just the opening image. Opening image is going to establish where you are, and usually by the end of that season, sometimes by the end of the series, it depends, your image should be the opposite of this image. But the second beat is where it's at. This is your beat that is known as theme stated, snippet of dialogue that gives you a sense of the deeper issues that the story is about. Now, the pilot of Season 1, along with the first episode of Season 8, Winterfell, it's clear to see that there's a lot of mirroring using visuals. It's very effective storytelling done visually through this medium. Episode 1, you see the first of 3 Night's Watchmen informs the other 2 about dismembered bodies, one of them believing it to be the work of the wildlings.
What do you expect? They're savages. One lot steals a goat from another lot, before you know it, they're ripping each other to pieces.
This, in fact, describes not just the perceived behavior of the wildlings, but unwittingly is making a damning judgment of the behavior of many of this show's key characters, as men and women will savagely wreak death and destruction in pursuit of greed, power, and justice. One of the major themes of this series is the jostling for power and revenge, the brutal methods in which people will employ to attain it, and of course, attributing the problem of the White Walkers to the others, the wildlings, the barbarians. What do we see in Season 8, Episode 1? As Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen make their way into Winterfell, we see the Northerners visibly disgusted and have a disapproving look upon their faces. Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow see themselves as the heroes coming in, marching to the North's aid with a formidable force of soldiers that are willing to fight for the Northerners. Despite not having any attachment to this place whatsoever, this foreign army is going to fight to save them. They're going to fight for their queen. Their queen has decided North is something worth fighting for. Despite all this, the Northerners simply see this as not a force that's come to save them, a force that's come to occupy them, a force that's almost equal in measure to the amount of danger that the White Walkers pose to them.
I warned you. Northerners don't much trust outsiders.
Game of Thrones, when a noble warrior comes back and saves his realm with a beautiful queen accompanied by a formidable force, as they walk through the gates, they are not met with cheers, because that is not Game of Thrones. They're met with suspicion, spawning from xenophobia and nationalism. And simply, from what the series has showed us, the North remembers. They don't just remember what's advantageous at the time. And even though we've seen the story and we've seen sacrifices in which Dany's made, all the North has seen is the jostling for power from both outside and within. Their own lords have brought them into battles based on their own lofty ideals and their own sense of duty and loyalty, and they've died in the fields far away from their homes. They've simply been oppressed. They look at this group of people that have come to help them. They don't look to see the good. They look to see who's going to take my food tonight, who might harm my family tonight, who is going to take my life. The last thing they think is, oh, they're here to save my life. When you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die at the top, but when you play the Game of Thrones, you all die at the bottom. And they've been playing for far too long. So as you can see, Pilot episode's first line of dialogue directly mirrors Season 8 Episode 1's first line of dialogue. Even though the real danger is right in front of them, they still can't stop fighting with each other.